As usual, I'm behind on basically everything, but writing this book was a headache and a half, and I'm ready to talk about it. Hey team, welcome back to Building a Book, a 12-week series all about my process of creating and then self-publishing a book. The book that I'm working on for this series is called Into the Void. It is sci-fi, and I went through so many different versions of this story that talking about getting that first draft done and actually writing this book, well, I don't even really know where to start, but I'm going to do my best to share with you what my experiences were, along with sharing some of my favorite first drafting tips, which hopefully all of this will somehow be helpful to you guys. But really, writing the first draft of a book is always going to be a different experience for every writer and really with every single manuscript, so let's just see how this goes. Alright, writing this book. I'm not even sure when I first started drafting Into the Void, but I do know that the first iteration of this book had 3 different ships with a bunch of different point of view characters on each ship, and then somehow they all ended up on the same ship. I even sent out a couple chapters of this book to Aaron and Matt, my husband. The feedback I got was just kind of meh, and I didn't even really know how to continue the story, so I ended up scrapping it, and then I went back to it again, and I'm not even really sure if that version of the book made any sense. And then finally, I decided I just needed to get this book done, so I took the time to outline it, which I talked about in last week's video. I ended up making it adult instead of a YA book, which made a big difference. And really, I just took time to pin down the characters, which really helped in figuring out what the plot was going to be. So I tried to let the characters kind of decide what happened next, but always leading towards the end game of what I needed to happen in order for this series to continue, if that makes any sense at all. But really, this book was a headache from beginning to end, even though I loved the characters and I was really excited about the world and getting to play around in a sci-fi universe with aliens and future technology and all of this stuff that I loved. But sci-fi is definitely harder than what I'm used to because I had to make up all of the rules that made sense for all of the technology and figuring out all of the aliens, and there was a lot more work that needed to be done, which was definitely not something I was used to, especially as someone who really kind of avoids outlining and world building before I started drafting. So for the first draft of this book, I just kind of tried to make it up as I went along, hoping it all made sense, and then knowing I'd need to clean up a lot of the stuff once I got to the end of the book and had to jump in with edits. All in all, Into the Void probably took me about 6 months to write from beginning to end, although I was doing other things at the same time, and I didn't know until right at the very end of it that I was going to use this project for building a book, so I wasn't keeping as close of a track as I probably should have, but it was a longer experience than most of my first drafts, which I do think helped make the editing process a little bit smoother, although we'll talk about that next week, I think. But for now, here are some of the first drafting tips I've picked up along the way with this book and other books, and hopefully they will be helpful. Tip number 1 is to know your scene before you start writing. For me, I was referencing an outline, but even if you're pantsing this book, try to figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish with the scene you're sitting down to write before you start writing it, and things will go so much more smoothly. Tip number 2 is one I used a lot for this book in particular, and that is if you're having trouble jumping back into your writing or you're struggling to get a scene done, let yourself start over. Take the version of that scene you've already written but haven't been able to finish, print it out and have it beside your computer, and then start from the beginning again. Reference that original scene as much as you need to, but then just start fresh. Start from the beginning, write down the chapter title, and just go. You may end up using a lot of what you've already written, you may end up not doing it. Usually it's kind of a combination for me, or I'm adding to the scene as I already have it and just continuing there, adding in new things as I need them, or changing things completely, and then just continuing until I've actually finished that chapter. This has been really, really helpful for me, and it is kind of cheating in that I do let myself count the new words, even though I'm technically kind of referencing things I've already written, but for me it just helps get me going again, especially if I've been really stuck for a couple of days, so I definitely recommend you give it a try. Tip number 3 is for the times where you're not doing something like NaNoWriMo and you want to have a clean first draft rather than just getting as many words down as you can every day. And that is that it is okay to let yourself lightly edit as you go if you need to. If there's a sentence that just isn't working or you want to go back and change something, do it. It's going to make less work for you later on. And you're going to have a better chance of doing that properly if you let yourself just make that edit right now as you've got it in your head, get it done, and then keep going. And my final tip of the day is that while it is totally okay to do a little bit of editing as you're writing that first draft, don't worry too much about the language you're using and getting it all perfect. Instead, focus on the purpose of each scene as you're writing it. What are the plot points you need to hit? What are the character motivations? All of that fun stuff. Get that down now, and then you can make all of the language work for you later. So yeah, there you have it. That was my experience writing this particular book, and I've got to say I am so glad that I never have to first draft this one again. As I'm filming this video, I do still have a little bit of editing to do, but I've got all of the plot points down, and for now it is just finessing the story and trying to make it as strong as I possibly can. First drafting can be hard and it's different for everyone. Really, there is no way to summarize this experience in one video, but what it comes down to is you've got to sit down in that chair and you've got to write your book, and you can worry about the rest of it later. If you do want a few more first drafting tips, I put a video up with the same kind of topic over on the Word Nerds channel today, so I will leave a link to that in the description down below. I'm not totally sure what I'm going to be jumping into next week, but be sure to tune in on Monday and find out. In the meantime, happy reading, happy writing, and I'll see you next time.